The evening was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and refuses to let go. I knew something was off the moment I walked into that house. It was like a chill that settled in, wrapping itself around my bones. My name is Evelyn Grant. I'm 58 years old and I live on the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia, in a quiet neighborhood where the neighbors smile but keep to themselves. Nothing out of the ordinary ever seems to happen here, but I know better. I've seen how the darkness hides behind closed doors, waiting for a moment to strike. For years, I built my career around crisis management. When the world felt like it was falling apart for someone, I was the one they called. When businesses needed to salvage their image after a scandal, I was there to help them navigate the storm. I learned not to panic, not to show emotion. I learned how to wait, observe, and strike only when it mattered. But I never imagined that I'd have to use those skills to save my own daughter. My daughter, Tasha, had always been fierce. At 30, she was a force of nature, intelligent, driven, and full of ambition. She worked as an architect, designing spaces that not only served a purpose but also brought communities together. She was passionate about creating environments where people could thrive, but I could see the shift in her eyes after she married Marcus. Marcus, on the surface, he was everything you'd want in a son-in-law. A lawyer, successful, well-connected, and always with a smile that could light up a room. I could tell there was something about him that didn't sit right with me, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Maybe it was just my motherly instincts at play. After all, he had his charm and his family was wealthy. His mother, Gloria, was always the picture of polished perfection. That evening, they'd invited me over for a simple dinner to celebrate my late husband, Carl. Tasha insisted on hosting it at her place. She said she wanted to recreate one of his favorite meals, thinking it might help ease the sorrow that seemed to linger in the corners of our lives. When I arrived, the table was immaculate. The kind of meal that looked like it belonged in a magazine, crisp white linen, soft lighting, and the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. It all felt a little too perfect, almost like it was rehearsed. Tasha greeted me with a tight hug, her arms stiff as though she was holding something in. I could see it in her eyes, something was wrong, but she said nothing. "Mom," she whispered, forcing a smile, "I'm glad you're here." Marcus greeted me warmly, the kind of charm that felt practiced, and Gloria, seated at the table with a glass of wine in her hand, watched us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Dinner was polite, the conversation casual, talking about work, the weather, and whatever else people say when they don't want to dig too deep. But I could feel it, the tension. It was subtle, like a thread pulled just a little too tight, threatening to snap. I wasn't the only one who noticed it. Midway through the meal, Tasha reached for the salad bowl, her hand trembling ever so slightly. I saw Marcus's eyes flicker to her, but he said nothing at first. Then, slowly, as though testing the waters, he asked, "Are you nervous, Tasha, or just careless as usual?" Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment I thought she might say something back, something sharp. But she didn't. Instead, Marcus stood up, walked over to her, and squeezed her wrist hard enough that I saw her wince. He leaned in close, his words only meant for her, but I saw her flinch at his touch. Gloria let out a little laugh. "That's how women learn," she said, lifting her glass. "Embarrassment works better than kindness." And just like that, the room fell into a stillness. Tasha's eyes flickered toward me. It wasn't a look that asked for comfort. No, it was a look that asked for permission. Permission to survive. I didn't say a word, I didn't react, not right then. The silence stretched on, but I wasn't going to be the one to break it. No, I had learned that in my line of work, you don't act on impulse, you wait, you observe. And then when the moment is right, you make your move. I could see it now. I could see exactly what was happening, but I also knew that the worst thing I could do was show my emotions. Because if I did, we would lose everything. It was in that moment, watching my daughter shrink back in the face of her husband's control, that I realized something. Tasha wasn't the same woman I had raised. She wasn't the same woman who had once stood so tall, so sure of herself. She was shrinking piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let that happen, not if I had anything to say about it. The night had only just begun, but I already knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to sit idly by and watch this happen to her. Not this time. The days that followed that dinner were filled with silence. No phone calls from Tasha on my drive home, no quick messages just to check in. She had always been the one to keep in touch, even when she was busy. but now it seemed like she was slipping away and I wasn't sure why. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. Tasha had always been independent, confident. She wasn't the type to let someone else dictate her choices. But lately, I noticed the subtle changes in her, the way she started second-guessing herself, how she seemed quieter when we spoke, how she would glance at Marcus before answering any question as if seeking approval. It didn't help that Marcus was always around, hovering just a little too close, making little comments that made my daughter shrink even further into herself. He wasn't overtly harsh, not in the way I might have expected if something was truly wrong. Instead, it was more insidious, like a drip of water that erodes the rock slowly but surely until there's nothing left but dust. I wanted to believe it was just the pressures of married life. After all, new relationships can be hard. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. There was a darkness creeping into my daughter's life, and I had to do something before it consumed her completely. I wasn't blind. I knew that Marcus wasn't what he seemed. At first, I thought I was just being overly protective, but then I started to see the way his mother, Gloria, would speak to Tasha. Every word dripped with condescension, like she was a project to be perfected, not a person to be respected. It wasn't the kind of behavior I had ever expected from a woman who seemed so polished on the outside. But then again, people like Gloria didn't show their true colors easily. Tasha was different now. The woman who had always been so sure of herself, who had stood her ground in every argument, was now apologizing for the smallest things. She apologized for her cooking when Gloria made a comment about it, for asking Marcus to help with a household chore, for speaking up in meetings at work. Every time she said sorry, it cut me deeper than I cared to admit. My daughter didn't apologize for existing, she never had, and yet here she was, shrinking bit by bit like a flower wilting in the dark. I kept asking myself what happened to her, where had my daughter gone? One afternoon, I went over to Tasha's apartment unannounced. I thought maybe if I just showed up, we could have some quiet time like we used to. Just the two of us, no distractions. But when I walked in, I felt the difference in the air right away. The apartment was darker than usual, the curtains drawn tightly against the light. Tasha was sitting on the couch, her posture slumped, her eyes downcast. She looked up when I entered, offering me a small smile. "Hey Mom, what's up?" I knew she was trying to act normal, but it didn't fool me. There was something missing from her tone, something absent in the way she held herself. She wasn't herself anymore. I sat beside her, trying to find the right words. "How's everything?" "How's Marcus?" Her smile faltered just a little, but enough for me to catch it. "He's fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "We're good, just busy." I could feel the distance between us growing with each word, each attempt at normalcy. I didn't want to press her, not yet, but I couldn't just let it go. "Tasha, you know you can talk to me, right? About anything." She nodded, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. It was like she was holding back, not from fear of what I might say, but because she had already started to believe that she didn't deserve to speak up anymore. The silence between us stretched on until I couldn't take it anymore. "What's going on, baby? You're not the same." Tasha looked at me then, her eyes wide, filled with an emotion I couldn't place. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Finally, she said, "It's just a lot, Mom. I'm just adjusting, that's all." "Adjusting to what?" I pressed. "This isn't just about adjusting, Tasha. This isn't the woman I raised." She sighed and leaned back against the couch, looking out the window as if the answers were hidden somewhere out there. "It's hard, you know. I thought I had it all figured out, but now it feels like I'm losing myself." And there it was, the crack in her armor. It wasn't just about marriage or work. It was something deeper, something that had been quietly changing her. I didn't need her to say it out loud. I could see it in the way she moved, in the way she spoke, in the way she no longer fought for herself. She was losing the very essence of who she was. The realization hit me hard. Marcus wasn't just her husband. He was controlling her subtly, patiently, until she began to believe that she wasn't enough on her own. That her voice didn't matter, that what she wanted didn't matter. And Gloria, his mother, wasn't helping, she was reinforcing it. I stood up from the couch, my heart heavy with the weight of it all. I had spent my career stopping disasters before they could ruin people's lives, and now I was standing here, watching my own daughter become one of those casualties. But I wasn't going to stand by this time. I wasn't going to watch her disappear without a fight. "You deserve more than this, Tasha," I said firmly, my voice steady. "You deserve to be seen, to be heard. Don't forget that." Don't let anyone make you forget who you are. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long while I saw a flicker of the Tasha I knew, the one who didn't back down, the one who believed in herself. But I also saw the fear, the uncertainty, and I knew I couldn't fix it all in one conversation. I couldn't just make the darkness go away, but I could stand with her. I could help her see the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start the journey back. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tense silence. I kept reaching out to Tasha, checking in, asking how she was, but she never seemed to want to talk about it. She'd smile and say everything was fine, but her eyes always gave her away. The weight in them was hard to ignore, even when she tried to mask it with small talk. I could feel the distance between us widening with every passing day, but I didn't know how to close it. How do you reach someone who doesn't want to be reached? How do you help a daughter who is slowly, quietly suffocating under the weight of someone else's control? I kept telling myself to give her space, to let her come to me when she was ready. But as the weeks turned into months, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. Losing the girl who used to speak her mind, who used to take on the world without flinching. And in her place, there was this version of Tasha who seemed smaller, more fragile, more willing to bend to the will of Marcus and his mother, Gloria. I wasn't blind to the changes, even if Tasha thought she could hide them. The way she started dressing more conservatively, soft, muted colors, long sleeves even when it wasn't cold. The way she would glance nervously at Marcus when she said anything, as if waiting for him to approve her words. The subtle shifts, the small compromises, it all began to add up, and I knew something had to be done. But what? I couldn't just march into her life and demand answers. She needed to find her voice again, but she couldn't do that as long as Marcus and Gloria were controlling the narrative. I couldn't sit by and watch her fade away. I had spent years untangling the messes of others, but this was personal. Tasha was my daughter, and I wasn't going to lose her without a fight. One afternoon, as I sat in my living room staring out the window, I heard my phone buzz. A message from Tasha. It was short, just a few words. "Can we talk?" I didn't waste any time. I called her immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mom," her voice was hesitant, soft. "Can I come over?" I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of everything she hadn't been able to say. "Of course, baby, come on over, I'll be here." I hung up and started pacing. This was it. She was finally ready to talk. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say, everything I needed her to hear. But what if I pushed too hard? What if she wasn't ready to face the truth? Minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Tasha standing there, her eyes red-rimmed but her shoulders squared. She was trying to hold it together, but I could see right through it. She was barely holding it together. I stepped aside and let her in, silently offering her the comfort of our familiar space. We sat on the couch, the room heavy with unspoken words. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I didn't rush her, I just waited. Finally, Tasha spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what happened, Mom. I thought I was happy. I thought I had everything figured out, but now it feels like I'm losing myself. Like I'm not the same person anymore." I wanted to reach out and pull her into my arms, but I knew she wasn't ready for that yet. "You're not losing yourself, Tasha. You've just been buried under a lot of pressure. And sometimes when you're buried for too long, you forget what it feels like to breathe." She let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can." "You don't have to fix it alone," I said softly. "I'm here, I'll always be here for you, but you have to start with yourself. You have to remember who you are." Tasha shook her head, looking down at her hands. "It's not that simple, Marcus. He's not the man I thought he was. At first it was small things, little comments about how I dressed, how I spoke, but it's more than that now. It's like he's trying to change me, to make me into someone I'm not, and I'm so tired, Mom, so tired of fighting it." The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected it, but hearing her say it out loud made it all too real. Marcus wasn't just being controlling. He was breaking her down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a shell of the woman she used to be. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, trying to hold it together for her. "You're not the problem, Tasha. He is, and his mother, Gloria, she's feeding into it. They've created a world where you're not allowed to be yourself. Where you're only worth something if you fit into their mold. But you don't have to live in that world. You don't have to let them dictate who you are." Tasha looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. But what if I don't know who I am anymore? You will, I said firmly. You will, it's still in you, Tasha, that fire, that strength, that woman who didn't back down for anyone, she's still in there. And I'm going to help you find her again. She wiped her eyes and nodded slowly, a small spark of determination flickering in her gaze. I want to fight. I want to be the woman I used to be. But I don't know how. We'll figure it out, I promised her, taking her hands in mine, one step at a time. The silence between us was different now. It wasn't heavy with the weight of unspoken truths anymore. It was full of something new, hope. Hope that Tasha could find her way back to herself. Hope that together we could dismantle the walls that had been built around her. For the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of the old Tasha. The woman who believed she could change the world, who wasn't afraid to speak up and stand her ground. And maybe, just maybe, we could bring her back. The next few days were a blur, a whirlwind of conversations and quiet realizations. Tasha had agreed to take the first step. It wasn't much, just a small decision to speak up a little more, to reclaim a fraction of her independence. But it was something, and something was enough. She began to open up slowly, little by little. The first time she spoke her mind in front of Marcus after we'd talked, I felt like I could finally breathe again. It was subtle, just a comment about a work project, a suggestion of how things could be done differently. But the way she said it, with confidence in her voice, with her eyes no longer searching for his approval, was a victory. Yet Marcus didn't miss a beat. The next time they had dinner with Gloria, I could feel the tension from miles away. It wasn't the kind of tension that bubbles over into an argument, no, it was quieter, more insidious. A game of manipulation and control that no one spoke out loud, but you could feel it in every exchanged glance and every unspoken word. I knew Marcus and Gloria would fight back. Control doesn't give up easily. They would come for Tasha in ways I couldn't predict, with subtle barbs that would make her second-guess herself, to chip away at the fragile steps she had taken toward regaining her voice. And sure enough, the first sign came a few days later. Tasha had invited me over for coffee, a rare moment where she seemed eager for company, but the atmosphere felt different the moment I walked in. The apartment was quieter than usual, like the air had thickened. Tasha was pacing near the window when I entered, her phone in her hand. She didn't look up at first, absorbed in whatever message she was reading. I could hear the faint frustration in her movements as she walked back and forth, the soft tapping of her shoes on the floor. Tasha, I called softly, my voice careful. She paused, her shoulders slumping as she turned to face me. Her eyes looked tired, more tired than I had seen them in a while. Hey, Mom, she greeted me, trying to force a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. What's going on, baby? I asked, stepping into the apartment and taking a seat on the couch. I didn't want to rush her, I just wanted her to know I was there. Tasha dropped onto the chair opposite me, her hands shaking slightly as she set the phone down. I don't know, Mom, things just aren't the same anymore, Marcus. He doesn't understand why I'm changing, and Gloria, she's always watching me now, like she's waiting for me to mess up. Waiting for you to mess up, I repeated, confused. What do you mean by that? She sighed heavily, rubbing her face as if trying to push away the tiredness that was settling in her bones. She's been talking to me a lot. Giving me advice on how to be a good wife, on how to keep the peace in the house. She tells me I need to dress better, wear less bold colors, and that I need to support Marcus more. But it's not just advice, Mom, it's like she's setting a standard I can't meet, like I'm not doing enough. A cold chill crept through me. I knew what was happening. This wasn't just advice or concern, it was conditioning. They were trying to shape her, mold her into something that fit into their narrow vision of what a wife should be. It wasn't about Tasha anymore, it was about control. I'm not happy, Mom, Tasha continued, her voice cracking slightly. And every time I try to speak up, every time I push back just a little, they make me feel like I'm doing something wrong, like I'm betraying them. Her words hit me like a slap. I could feel the hurt in them, the confusion, the exhaustion of trying to keep up a facade that was becoming harder to maintain. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. Not anymore. Tasha, I said, my voice steady, you are not betraying anyone by being yourself. You are not betraying them by speaking your truth. They have manipulated you into believing that their control is normal, that their demands are just the way things are. But that's not true, and you don't have to live like this anymore. She looked up at me, the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. I don't know if I can leave, though. What if it's just me being difficult? What if I'm the problem? No, baby, I said firmly. You're not the problem, they are, and you can't keep sacrificing yourself for their idea of who you should be. You have a right to your voice, your thoughts, your space. And you have a right to live your life the way you want to live it, not the way they want. Tasha was quiet for a long time after that, lost in thought. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, her mind working through the mess of emotions and doubts that had built up over the years. I could see the internal battle. She wanted to believe what I was saying, but the pull of Marcus and Gloria's influence was strong. I don't know where to start, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What if I lose everything? You won't lose everything, I reassured her, reaching across the table to gently take her hand. You'll lose the things that don't matter, the control, the manipulation, the lies. But you will gain something far more valuable, your freedom, your peace, your self-respect. Tasha nodded slowly, but there was still a fear in her eyes. I'm scared, Mom. I know, sweetheart, but the hardest part is over. You've already realized what's happening. Now it's about taking back control one step at a time, and you don't have to do it alone. For the first time in a long while, Tasha looked at me with something that resembled confidence, if only a flicker of it. She was still uncertain, still scared, but the decision had been made. She wasn't going to let them win, and I would be there to help her through every step of it. As she stood up, finally pushing the chair back from the table, I knew that this was the beginning of something important. It was the beginning of Tasha reclaiming herself, of no longer allowing Marcus and Gloria to dictate who she was. This was the first step toward the life she deserved, one where she could breathe again. And more importantly, this time she was going to fight for herself. The following weeks felt like a delicate balancing act. Tasha was beginning to push back, slowly testing her boundaries and trying to reclaim some semblance of her former self. But Marcus and Gloria weren't going to let go easily. Control, as I had learned in my years of managing corporate crises, doesn't release its grip without a fight. Tasha had begun to assert herself, but it wasn't without the quiet backlash. Marcus would make snide remarks as if trying to gauge how far he could push before she would retreat. His comments were subtle at first, compliments that turned into critiques, innocent suggestions that became demands. He would say things like, "I don't think that outfit really suits you," or "You should let me handle that meeting, I know people better." At first, Tasha would let it slide, but each time I could see it wearing her down, little by little. One evening, she called me after one of those subtle digs. Her voice was tight, holding something back, but I could hear the frustration bubbling under the surface. "I'm so tired of it, Mom," she admitted, barely able to get the words out. "It's like no matter what I do, it's never enough for them. I try to do what I want, but Marcus, he doesn't understand. And Gloria, she's like a shadow, always in the background, watching, judging." "I know, baby," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You can't let them make you feel small anymore. You have every right to speak up. You have every right to make your own decisions, even if they don't agree with them." She sighed heavily, the weight of everything pressing down on her. "But it's hard, Mom. Every time I try to push back, it feels like they just pull me back in, like I'm doing something wrong." "You're not wrong for standing up for yourself," I reminded her gently. "You've spent too long ignoring what you need. You can't let that continue. You are not just an accessory to their lives. You are a whole person with your own thoughts, your own dreams, your own voice. Don't ever forget that." Tasha was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear the battle going on inside her. She wanted to believe me. I could hear it in the hesitation in her voice. But there was still so much doubt, so much fear of what might happen if she truly broke free. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the fear in her words almost palpable. "What if I lose everything? What if I can't get away?" I understood that fear all too well, the fear of losing what you've built, even if that thing is slowly suffocating you. I'd seen it in countless people I worked with, and I knew it wasn't something you could just talk away. It was real, and it had its claws in deep. "You don't have to lose everything," I told her, trying to steady her, "but you do need to stop letting them control you. The life you're afraid to lose is the one where you've let them make your choices. The life you're afraid to walk away from is the one where your voice has been silenced. But that life isn't the only one you can have. You can create a new one. It might not be easy, but I'll be here every step of the way." She took a shaky breath. "I want to try. I want to be strong enough to do this." Then you will be, I said. You're stronger than you think, Tasha. You just need to start believing in yourself again. That night, she sounded different when she hung up, lighter, as though a weight had been lifted, if only for a moment. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Marcus and Gloria were never going to let her go without a fight. And the first sign that the fight was far from over came just a few days later. Tasha invited me over for lunch, and I could tell something was off the moment I stepped inside. The atmosphere in her apartment was thicker than usual, and Tasha didn't meet my eyes immediately. She stood near the window, her back to me, the weight of whatever was going on pressing down on her. "What happened?" I asked gently, stepping toward her. "Is everything okay?" She turned to face me, her expression guarded. "I had a fight with Marcus," she said, her voice quieter than usual, "and Gloria. She said some things that hit too close to home." I felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in my stomach. "What kind of things?" Tasha shook her head, her hands trembling as she crossed her arms over her chest. "She said that if I didn't learn to accept my role, if I didn't learn to keep the peace, I'd end up losing everything. She said that women like me, women who want to be heard, don't know how to be happy. That if I didn't stop pushing back, I'd regret it." It was like a punch to the gut. I had heard the whispers before, the subtle ways Gloria tried to make Tasha feel small, like her independence was a threat. But to hear it all laid out so plainly, it was maddening. "Don't listen to her, Tasha," I said, taking a step closer. "That's just fear talking, fear of losing control. You don't need to live under that." Tasha's eyes welled with tears. "I'm so tired, Mom. I don't know how to fight anymore. Every time I try, they just shut me down. It's like I'm stuck." I stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not stuck. You're just figuring out how to stand tall again. This won't happen overnight, but you don't have to go through it alone. You're not alone." She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes, but I could still see the doubt creeping into her expression. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but what I did know deep in my bones was that Tasha was capable of finding herself again. She had already started to push back. She had already started to speak up. And no matter how much Marcus and Gloria tried to suppress her, I wasn't going to let them win. The first step had been taken. It was time for the next one. As I looked at Tasha, I knew the road ahead would be messy. But I also knew that, no matter what happened, I wasn't going anywhere. We were in this together, and I would help her fight for the life she deserved, one where she was free to be herself again. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only deepened. I could feel the change in Tasha, the quiet fire of determination beginning to flicker behind her eyes, but it wasn't without sacrifice. Every step she took forward was met with resistance, both from Marcus and Gloria, and sometimes from her own doubts. The cycle of control wasn't easy to break, especially when it had been woven into the fabric of her life for so long. Yet, I saw something in her that I hadn't seen in months, a glimmer of the woman I had raised, the one who had once stood strong and unapologetic. One evening, after Tasha had come over to my place for a long overdue dinner, I noticed something different. She seemed lighter, less burdened. She laughed more freely than she had in a long time. I could tell she was starting to breathe again, but I knew she wasn't out of the woods yet. "So, how's everything going with Marcus?" I asked casually, trying to sound as neutral as possible, though I couldn't hide the concern in my voice. It was a careful question, one that I had been asking for weeks now, trying to understand where Tasha was in all of this. Was she still lost in the fog of manipulation, or was she beginning to see through the illusion? Tasha hesitated, her fork hovering in the air for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I'm not sure anymore, Mom. Things are complicated." I leaned back in my chair, taking in her words carefully. "Complicated how?" Tasha's gaze dropped to her plate, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass as she tried to gather her thoughts. "He's different now. In the beginning, when we first got together, everything felt so easy, like he really saw me, like he admired my work, my ideas. But now, it's like I'm becoming invisible. He says he still supports me, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like he's more interested in making sure I don't outshine him." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the hurt that lingered just beneath the surface. "That's not support, Tasha, that's control. He's trying to keep you small so he doesn't feel threatened by your strength." She nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "I know, but it's not easy to just walk away from that, Mom. We've built so much together, and I keep thinking that maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe it's not as bad as I think." I felt my heart ache for her because I knew exactly how hard it was to untangle yourself from someone you thought you loved, someone you thought was your partner. But the truth was undeniable. Marcus wasn't supporting Tasha's growth, he was trying to hold her back. "Let me ask you something, Tasha," I said gently, leaning forward. "When you think about your future, when you imagine the person you want to be, do you see yourself with Marcus?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. She opened her mouth to respond but paused as if the question had caught her off guard. Her eyes seemed to search the air between us as if the answer was just out of reach. "I don't know," she admitted after a long moment. "I don't know if I can picture it anymore. And that scares me." I took her hand across the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's okay to be scared, it's okay to not have all the answers, but what you do know is that you have the right to choose your path. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone the right to decide who you are or who you're meant to be." Tasha looked down at her hands, her fingers curling around mine, and I saw the faintest trace of tears in her eyes. "I don't want to lose myself, Mom. I don't want to forget who I am, what I stand for." "You won't," I said firmly, my voice steady and sure. "You are not going to lose yourself, not on my watch and not on anyone else's, but you have to believe that. You have to be willing to fight for yourself even when it's hard." There was a long silence between us, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. She was thinking, weighing her options, the enormity of the decision before her clearly weighing on her heart. But I could see it, the shift was happening. She was beginning to see that her happiness, her voice, her future mattered more than the life she had built under someone else's thumb. The next day, Tasha came over again. This time, there was a difference in her, the way she carried herself, the way she held her head high. She didn't look defeated. She didn't look like she was shrinking. She looked like she was taking up space in the world again. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I think it's time for me to have a real conversation with Marcus. I can't keep living like this, pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I've been so focused on trying to make it work, but I've forgotten something important." "What's that?" I asked, my heart racing slightly in anticipation. "I've forgotten myself," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been so caught up in making him happy, in trying to be the perfect wife, that I've lost who I am, and I'm done with that. I need to find my own way again. I need to figure out who I am without him." Tasha stood up, pacing the room now as if the words were finally flowing freely, breaking down the walls she had built up. "I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm going to take back my life. It's time to stop living for someone else." I stood up too, my heart swelling with pride. "That's right, baby, you don't need anyone's permission. You are already enough, you've always been enough, and no matter what happens next, I'll be here. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I had raised, the one who wasn't afraid to speak her truth, the one who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. She was back, not entirely, but she was on her way. The path ahead would still be filled with challenges. Marcus and Gloria weren't going to let go of their hold on her easily, but Tasha had taken the first step. And that was all I needed to see. I knew she was going to be okay, and I would be right here ready to fight alongside her every step of the way. It wasn't just about the relationship anymore. It was about reclaiming herself. And in that moment, I knew that nothing at all was going to stand in her way. It was late one evening when Tasha finally decided to confront Marcus. She'd been stewing over the conversation for days, and I could tell she was walking a fine line between fear and resolve. It wasn't the kind of thing you just casually slip into conversation. This was about her life, her future, and everything she'd been quietly fighting against was finally coming to a head. I knew she was terrified. She called me earlier that evening, the tremble in her voice barely masked by the steely determination she was trying to project. "I'm doing it tonight, Mom," she said. "I can't keep going like this. I'm having the conversation. I'm going to tell him how I feel." "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing for her. "You don't have to rush this. You've been thinking about it for a while, so there's no harm in taking your time." "I've already been thinking about it for too long," she replied firmly. "I know what I need to do." I didn't want to hold her back, but I also wanted to make sure she wasn't walking into a situation where she would feel trapped again. "Just remember, Tasha," I said gently, "he might not react the way you want him to. Marcus has never been good at seeing things from your perspective, but you know what's best for you. This is about you taking back your voice." I know, Mom, she said quietly. I don't want to be scared anymore. You won't be scared forever, I assured her. This is just the first step. The hardest part is over. You've already made the decision, now you just have to follow through. The phone call ended with her promising to let me know what happened, and I hung up, my heart in my throat. It felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for news that could go one of two ways. Either Tasha would reclaim herself, or she would lose another piece of who she was. A few hours later, I got the call. Mom, her voice came through the phone, shaking but clear. I did it. I told Marcus everything. My heart skipped a beat. And he didn't take it well, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was upset. He said I was overreacting. He said I was being ungrateful, that everything he's done for me is more than enough. I could feel the tension in her words, the weight of the moment sinking in. And how do you feel now? Relieved, she replied, a small, shaky laugh escaping her lips. But also scared. I didn't know if he'd be angry, if he'd say things I couldn't take back. But I think I'm more afraid of losing myself than losing him. That hit me like a wave. It was the truth she'd been running from for so long, and now, for the first time, it was out in the open. She wasn't afraid of losing Marcus. She was afraid of losing who she was in the process. Listen to me, Tasha, I said firmly. You did the right thing. This is your life, and you have every right to stand up for who you are. If Marcus can't understand that, then he's not the person you thought he was, but you are not his to control, not anymore. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end of the line. I know, but what if he doesn't change, Mom? What if he doesn't listen? What if I've already lost him? You haven't lost anything yet, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You've gained something, your voice, your independence. And I promise you, Tasha, if Marcus really loves you, he'll listen. If he truly cares about who you are, he'll make the changes that matter. But if he doesn't, you'll know that you tried. And that's all you can do. There was a long silence, and for a moment I thought maybe she had disconnected. But then she spoke again, her voice a little stronger. I'm scared, Mom, she admitted. But I know now that I can't live like this anymore. I've been holding myself back for too long, and I'm not doing it anymore. I felt a lump in my throat as I listened to her. The woman I had raised, the one who believed in herself and fought for what she deserved, was slowly coming back. She was waking up to the fact that she wasn't just someone's wife or daughter, she was Tasha, and that was enough. You're not alone in this, Tasha, I said, my voice soft but full of conviction. No matter what happens, I'm here. You have people who love you, you have people who see you, who see your worth. I know, Mom, I know, she said quietly. I just needed to hear it. I needed to remind myself that I matter, that I have a right to my own happiness. She was quiet again, and I could tell that the conversation had shifted something inside of her. Maybe it wasn't the end of the battle, but it was a pivotal moment. She had made the decision to fight for herself, and that was the first real step toward freedom. The next few days were a whirlwind. Marcus was distant, and Gloria started making veiled comments, trying to sweep the issue under the rug. Tasha had made her stand, but the consequences of that stand were beginning to unfold in a way she hadn't fully expected. But I could see the shift in her. She wasn't backing down, she wasn't apologizing for being herself, and that was something I hadn't seen in so long. One evening, as we sat in her apartment, Tasha turned to me, her eyes clear and focused. I'm done waiting for him to change, Mom. I can't keep hoping he'll become the man I need him to be. I've realized that I deserve more than what he's willing to give. My heart swelled with pride. You do, Tasha. You deserve someone who sees you, who values you for exactly who you are, not who he wants you to be. Tasha nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. I'm not going to shrink anymore. I'm done shrinking for anyone. And just like that, I saw the last of her doubts fall away. She was standing tall again. For the first time in years, I believed it. Tasha was finally starting to take control of her own life, and I knew nothing could stand in her way now. She was ready to live for herself, ready to be free, and no matter where this journey took her, I knew one thing for certain: she was no longer afraid to walk it. The weeks that followed Tasha's conversation with Marcus were anything but easy. While she had taken the first step toward reclaiming herself, the reality of what it meant to truly break free set in with full force. Marcus didn't give up without a fight. He didn't suddenly change into the man Tasha had hoped he could become. No, he dug in deeper. He tried to manipulate, to twist the narrative in his favor, to make her feel like she was the one at fault for wanting more. I could see the strain on her face every time we spoke, the lines of exhaustion becoming more pronounced. She had made her decision, but the road to true freedom wasn't going to be smooth. Marcus was relentless in his attempts to reassert control, and Gloria, of course, was never far behind, offering unsolicited advice wrapped in the guise of concern. It was clear now this wasn't just a marriage issue. This was about a deeper, more insidious power struggle. Tasha tried to stay strong, but the emotional toll was visible. The phone calls were less frequent, and I knew she was wrestling with the weight of her decisions. Was she making the right choice? Was she giving up on a relationship that at one point felt like the answer to everything? One evening, after a particularly tense dinner with Marcus, Tasha called me in tears. It wasn't a common occurrence. My daughter was strong even when she felt vulnerable, but I could hear the rawness in her voice this time. "Mom, I don't know if I can do this," she said between sobs. "He's making it sound like I'm the one who's wrong. That I'm the one who's not trying. He says if I just give him more time, we can work it out. But I don't think I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough." I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath as I tried to steady myself. I couldn't let my fear for her cloud my judgment. This wasn't the time for comforting words or easy solutions. This was the time for truth, for strength. "You are strong enough," I said, my voice calm despite the tightening in my chest. "You've already proven that. You've spoken your truth, and that's a huge step. But I need you to listen to me, Tasha. Marcus is trying to control the narrative to make you feel like you're the problem, but you're not. Don't let him rewrite your story. You've been strong for so long, and now you need to be strong enough to walk away from someone who is making you shrink." She was quiet for a long time, and I could hear the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. Finally, she spoke. "I know you're right," she said, voice small but determined. "But I feel like I'm losing everything. I'm losing the life I thought I would have, the life I thought we were building." "The life you thought you were building was a lie," I reminded her softly. "It wasn't real. It was built on his terms, his needs, his control. And you can't keep living for someone else. You deserve a life where you can be yourself, fully, without fear, without hesitation." Tasha let out a shaky breath, a soft sob escaping her lips. "I don't want to keep fighting, Mom. I don't know how much more of this I can take." I understood her pain. I understood the fear of losing everything, of stepping away from the life she had known for so long. But sometimes the only way forward was through the pain. Sometimes the only way to find peace was to let go of what was dragging you down. "You're not alone in this, Tasha. You never were," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "You have people who love you, people who believe in you, and you have yourself, and that's all you need." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I think I need some space from him," she said quietly, her voice steady now. "I need to figure out what I really want. I need to find myself again." "Then take that space," I said, my heart swelling with pride for the woman she was becoming. "Take all the time you need. Don't let anyone rush you or tell you what you should be. You get to choose this time, Tasha. This is your life." The line between us went silent for a moment, and I could feel the shift in her. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let Marcus or anyone else define her anymore. She was finally beginning to see herself clearly. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and difficult conversations. Tasha took a step back from Marcus, telling him that she needed time to figure things out. He didn't take it well, of course. He tried to guilt her, manipulate her into coming back. He said she was overreacting, that this was all just a phase. He even tried to apologize, promising things would be different. But Tasha wasn't buying it. And for the first time in a long time, I could see the strength returning to her. It wasn't easy, but she was standing her ground, refusing to let him pull her back into the toxic patterns they had built together. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. Tasha called me, her voice calm but resolute. "I'm done, Mom," she said quietly. "I'm done trying to make it work. I'm done pretending. I can't live like this anymore." My heart surged with a mix of relief and pride. It wasn't the end of the road, far from it. The aftermath of this decision would be complicated, messy even, but Tasha had finally chosen herself. She had chosen to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing for who she was. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've done something so brave. You've chosen yourself, and that's the greatest gift you can give yourself." For the first time in what felt like forever, Tasha didn't hesitate. "Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have done this without you." The weight of her words hit me in the best way possible. I had spent so much of my life guiding others through crises, helping them find their way through the storm. But this was personal. This was my daughter, and she had found her way out of the darkness and into the light. It wasn't the end of the story, it wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the beginning of something new, a new chapter where Tasha could finally start to breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a future for her, a future where she wasn't living for anyone else but herself. The months that followed Tasha's decision were transformative. The weight that had once pressed so heavily on her shoulders started to lift, little by little. It wasn't an immediate change, and it wasn't without its setbacks. There were moments when the fear would return, when the loneliness would creep in, and when she wondered if she had made the right choice. But each day, she became more certain that she had done what was necessary. Tasha moved out of the apartment she had shared with Marcus and started fresh. She found a small, cozy place in a quieter part of the city, a place where she could breathe freely without looking over her shoulder. The first time I visited, I saw her in a light I hadn't seen in years, no longer weighed down by someone else's expectations, but standing tall in the life she was beginning to build on her own terms. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon. The woman who had once shrunk herself to fit into a mold was now reclaiming every part of herself that had been hidden. The boldness I remembered in her was slowly returning, her laughter, her confidence, her sense of self. And she started doing the things she loved again. She returned to her work with a passion I hadn't seen in a long time. She got involved in a few new projects at her nonprofit, working with communities to design spaces that were truly for the people, not just functional, but beautiful. She even began running again, something she had given up during those years of trying to make a relationship work at the expense of her own well-being. One afternoon, we sat together in her new apartment, sipping coffee as she told me about a new design she had just finalized for a park project that was close to her heart. "I think this one's going to change the whole neighborhood," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's everything I've ever wanted to do, create spaces where people feel seen and heard. Where they feel like they belong." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You've always had this inside of you, Tasha. It was just buried for a while, but now it's all coming to the surface." She smiled back, her hand resting on mine. "Thanks for never giving up on me, Mom. I don't know how I would have made it without you." But it wasn't just me, it was her, the strength she had within herself, the resilience that had always been there, just waiting to be unleashed. And now, she was living a life that was entirely her own. As for Marcus and Gloria, the relationship with them was never truly repaired. Tasha made the difficult decision to cut ties completely. There were no more guilt trips, no more manipulation. She had seen the truth of who they were, and she knew she deserved better than that. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the pull of their toxicity threatened to drag her back in, but she held strong. And I couldn't have been prouder of her. She had found her way, and that path was now one of her own choosing. We never know what the future holds, but I can tell you one thing: I am confident that whatever Tasha faces next, she will face it with the strength and conviction that she's always had. She's not the same person she was before all of this started. She's better, stronger, and more sure of herself than ever. And you know what? It's not just Tasha's story, it's every woman's story who's ever felt like they've lost themselves. It's a reminder that no matter how deep you've buried your voice, no matter how far you've shrunk to make others comfortable, you can always reclaim yourself. You can always choose your happiness. You can always choose you. If you're reading this and you're in the middle of your own struggle, I want you to hear me. You are not alone. You are not weak for wanting more. You are not wrong for standing up for yourself. And just like Tasha, you have the power to rebuild your life one step at a time. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Reach out to the people who can support you, and never be afraid to take that first step toward your own freedom. Because you deserve to be seen, you deserve to be heard, and most importantly, you deserve to be free. Take the step. Your new beginning starts today.